Thank you for the water. I actually did not bring any water, which is kind of dumb. My name is Neil. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Neil.
Gosh, thank you, Farrell, for inviting me to do this. This is great. Where do I begin? Well, I'm an alcoholic, as you guys know. I just said so. I'm kind of those. I'm one of those alcoholics that firmly believes he was alcoholic from like conception. You know what I mean? Like it was just over when I was born. I was alcoholic. I don't know. Because when I was a kid, I was like addicted to Pokemon cards. I mean, that was a big thing. And then I was addicted to food. That was a big thing. And like all sorts of things I was just addicted to. And I can remember my first drink at 16, and I was with some friends at a party, a Halloween party, and I had arrived. I think I knew I was an alcoholic from the very beginning, but I didn't care because I'm delusional, like an alcoholic. So that being said, I had a fairly strict childhood, very Catholic, very Catholic. And but that's not a bad thing to me because I'm still a practicing Catholic. And but it was one of those things where, as an alcoholic, we have a hole in our heart for God. And I definitely did not understand what my higher power was at a young age. I was very confused. And I can remember getting confirmed in the church, and I went up to Father Adrian, and I lied in my first confession. That's how you know I'm an alcoholic. We lie, even in times where it's really important not to lie, So I did that, and I ended up getting confirmed, but I fell away, and I think that's really kind of my story in a whole, because God was always reaching out for me, my higher power, but I wasn't reaching back. I started rebelling pretty soon after that, staying up late, playing video games. I remember I was on Skype with friends till like 5 a.m. That's what a normal 13-year-old does, right? And I also got in trouble, quite a bit. I was hiding things from my parents, and just things started to slowly but surely unwind in my life. I was wound up, and I had a tough go at it, especially as high school went on. I'm a young guy. I'm 25, so this is, that wasn't that long ago for me. So towards the end of high school, I really started drinking, and I'm also an addict too. So I smoked marijuana, and that was, things got pretty bad pretty quickly. I ended up with several mental illnesses from the marijuana and probably the drinking too, and I can remember this one time I broke my foot with on a camping trip with friends, and I was so messed up that I was an adrenaline junkie too. Like I would do all these things to, I was the life of the party, or at least I thought I was. I broke my foot, and things just ended up spiraling from there. I had this summer where I was really depressed, and I was trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and I was trying several things. One included self-medicating. I self-medicated myself for a variety of reasons, and that would continue after flunking college. I'm a grade A flunker, let me tell you, because I went to this prestigious singing school, and some of you guys might know I like to sing, just putting that out there. And I got in, but I was still using. I was ill, mentally ill, and I just didn't last. That dream died very quickly for me, and it wasn't sustainable. And cue years of things would happen with a girlfriend, and I would move out. I would not tell my parents. I would end up homeless, which is a reoccurring theme in my story, by the way, in a tent in the woods. Every time. That's where it led me. That's where my drinking led me. It was self-isolating. I didn't care about anybody. I didn't care. I didn't want to care, and that got me into several precarious positions, like the psych ward, jails, institutions, and death. Now, I haven't experienced death, but I've gotten very close before, it was just several years of treatment. I never thought like I had a problem. I knew that like I was probably an alcoholic, but I didn't think my life was like unmanageable. I was like, okay, so maybe I might have a problem, but it's not there yet. I didn't think I had really this unmanageability about my life, so I would go psych ward to treatment center to psych ward again. It would be like 3 months, 6 months after I graduate the program or leave, because I did that quite a bit. And guess where I ended up? Homeless several times. It wasn't really until the cycle would continue for a long time. And they told me, they said, you're alcoholic, you need to go to AA. I was like, I'm not, who cares about that? I didn't, I really didn't. And, I was first introduced to AA through this recovery center called Recovery in Tune down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I lived there for almost a year, I think. I can remember my very first AA meeting, right? It was a woman who was an alcoholic, but she was also an addict. She was talking about crystal meth. I was like, I've never done crystal meth. So I just shut down my brain, not thinking that maybe that was part of the disease of alcoholism and addiction, So I just tuned in. Maybe I went to 1 or 2 meetings that whole entire time, It was required. I just didn't care. And that would be another theme. I just didn't care, But it wasn't until my life was getting pretty bad, my mental health completely deteriorated. I had something called psychosis, which, if you guys don't know, is this illness where you're not in touch with reality at all. You're delusional. And for some reason, I can remember this. I thought I was a Rasta man, like Bob Marley. I really thought that. I can remember that. And I would continue being in Delulu land for a little bit, and it was quite a shock to me when things weren't working out. I was like, okay, this alcohol and drug problem, not a problem, until it was, and it wasn't until I got to this treatment center called SLOW, Southern Live Oak Wellness, shout out because they're awesome. That I really started to get a hold of my mental health, just a little bit. Enough to get me out of psychosis, but I was still using. And if you guys know anything about using and taking psych medications, they do not mix. Drinking and psych medications just do not mix. And I would get in trouble. I would hide things. I would hide my bottles, and I would hide my weed pens, in my closet, like somewhere where nobody can ever find them, except for it was found, of course. And I remember I was going to therapy because, I had to after treatment. I had to continue going to therapy, and I like therapy, outside issue, but I think it's helpful for me. Yeah, I got caught. My mother brought the whole bin of weed pens, alcohol, whatever drugs into the into the therapy room, and I was like, no, it's over. and it was over, my therapist said, you got to stop using or I'm not going to be able to see you. And, that experience and then another one where I actually had a fiance and I was using all throughout the relationship. And again, I had my mental health. I mean, I knew about mental health things, right? But I just didn't think my life was unmanageable enough to get sober, and it wasn't until I broke up with her and I stopped seeing my therapist and things were just getting worse and worse and worse. I was quitting jobs or getting fired, and that I decided to go back to slow for what I called getting dry. I wanted to get dry, and I wanted to see what I could, if I could do the sober thing. And I went, and guess what they prescribed me? Alcoholics Anonymous. I still didn't want to listen. And I was in their PHP program, and if you guys don't know what that is, that's a partial hospitalization program where you kind of live with other residents, other clients, they call them, and you get mental health treatment, but you get to work and have some degree of autonomy. And I remember I wasn't I was in the slow program, and I had to submit to these drug tests, right? I was like, okay, whatever. And they knew I was using, but I just didn't care. And I had to submit these drug tests, and I was called out on it several times. I overdosed. And that really changed everything for me, I ended up going to this place called Atlanta Recovery Place, and God bless them. They're awesome people. They really saved my life. I wouldn't be standing here without them, just blessed people through and through. And, but I got introduced to Narcotics Anonymous, right? And it's still a 12-step program. And, I got my first sponsor, ever, who ended up being later, later what I find out before I actually went to ARP, that he was the director of ARP. So my first sponsor was the director, right? And so I had to try to go to meetings, and I knew I was starting to think I had a problem, but I just couldn't stop. I mean, I really couldn't stop, and I would continue just being a fool, as I call it, using in rehab. I mean, what's new under the sun, really? I used a ton in rehab, and this is the part of the story where it gets interesting for me, because I wasn't quite in AA yet. I was doing some AA meetings, but I went. ARP, they're like, you're too much even for us, right? So they shipped me down for 7 days to this, I forget what the place is called now, but it's a treatment center, a rehab down in South Georgia. I forget what it's called. What? Bridges of Hope. No, not Bridges of Hope. It was another rehab center. I went there for 7 days, and I quit marijuana. I was done. I was like, I can continue doing this, or I could not. And there I quit marijuana, and that was like October of 23, I believe. So that's when I got sober off marijuana, and still sober from marijuana today. But I came back, and what's new under the sun? I started using again, But this time it was a lot more insidious. The disease was really taking hold of me, as if I didn't learn already. I had to smash my head against the wall a million times to even understand that I had this disease, this deadly, deadly disease. And, I had to, I started saving. So, like, some of the medication I was taking could be considered like narcotics in some kind of way. Or at least I figured out that they had a narcotic component because I'm crazy, I have the insanity of using, right? And so I would save up my pills. I mean, maybe I wasn't using anymore, but I was still using because I was like saving up my pills, not taking my meds, and just getting high with one of these pills. And I remember I remember I got into this program. They gave me a little bit of money called the Zone for Reentry program that taught me a lot about job skills and recovery, which was fantastic. But I remember I was using throughout that time. I had this little man purse. I forget what they're called. Fanny pack, yes. And I would have these pills in my fanny pack, and I would go to the class. And I'll be like, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom. And then I would pot the pills. But that would end, because and this drug is similar to alcohol in a lot of ways. So I would wake up the morning of April the 21st, 2024, high as a kite, off nutmeg and gabapentin. So let me tell you, that was the last drug, and also, I mean, technically the last drink, because that drug does a lot, it's very, very similar to alcohol in a lot of ways. So maybe it wasn't an actual drink, but I consider it getting sober, period, right? So I got sober. And I woke up and I was like, what the heck am I doing with my life? I had a pounding headache. I realized my life was going nowhere, and that it was unmanageable. So I took a step one without even realizing it. I realized I was an alcoholic, and my life was unmanageable. And maybe I haven't talked a lot about drinking, but I would often drink when I drugged. Those were hand in hand for me. So anybody who talks to me after this meeting, like, you didn't talk about alcohol enough, I'll be like, well, it's because I did both at the same time. Alcoholics Anonymous, talking about drugs. Anyway, so I would get sober, but I still didn't want to go into the program. I did this thing called Smart Recovery, and it worked okay. It's not the 12-step program. It's a more secular kind of program. It doesn't have God or a higher power or whatever you want to call it in the program at all. And but they had these mental health kind of tools to help you deal with cravings. I'm like, okay, this is cool. And I would go through that. I'd run through that program, get a certification in it, which I still have to this day. I could be a smart recovery facilitator if I wanted to be, but I don't, because I like this program. I would run that through, but it wasn't helping the disease for me. I would do these little cool mental health tricks, like put my head in ice water to like reset my nervous system or whatever if I was anxious. They would teach me things like that, or the ABC model, or cognitive behavioral therapy, which is cool, but it doesn't relate with the disease at all. And I would end up having a mental breakdown around December of 24, right around Christmas. And this is important because I just came back to the church. I was testing the God idea, and the undercurrent of me actually using was me finding a relationship with God, because maybe I would get to step 3 and start a prayer, do this 3rd step prayer. Maybe I would go to synagogue with my Jewish friend, or maybe I would even go to church with my parents, and occasionally. And so I was increasingly opening my eyes up to a higher power. And I go back to the church and full blown become Catholic again. Well, I still, I interpret this as that I wasn't giving God my alcohol problem, right? I wasn't asking him to take away the insanity of my alcohol problem, and I would have this mental breakdown, and I would go to where? Slow, 6 times, by the way, 6 times. That should tell you I'm a nutcase. And there was this cool guy in there. His name was Lance, and he talked to me about the program. And I think it was really the first time, I took the full first step, and I was like, okay, I'm an alcoholic, my life's unmanageable. I was desperate. I was desperate for relief. I was like, if I'm not doing drugs, I have a mental breakdown. If I don't drink, I have a mental breakdown, and I lose jobs, and, it was terrible. So I ended up doing my 30 days or whatever, best 30 days of my life, because I was actually reading the big book, awesome book. But I had a lot of questions because I didn't have a sponsor. I was like, I can't remember what I was asking, but I'm sure it was a lot of newcomer questions. And I would go back to Atlanta Recovery Place. Again, those guys are angels, and I was ready. I was ready this time. And I dove headfirst into the program. Maybe not Alcoholics Anonymous, because I got sober, what I call drying out, and then actually doing the steps and becoming really sober, and Cocaine Anonymous. So I did the steps with a competent sponsor in Cocaine Anonymous. And great guy, really, solid guy. And he took me through the steps. And, I remember step 3 was a particular turning point for me because I believed in God at this point. And as Bill calls it, some people in AA even return to the religion of their fathers. So I definitely did that. But again, I did not think that I could give my entire self and my alcohol problem to God, So that was a big turning point for me. And then that's when I decided to do all the steps that I was so afraid of doing for so many years, I would go on to do steps 4 and 5, making a harms list, making a sex inventory, all this kind of stuff. But steps 4 and 5 were almost like a confession in the Catholic way, where you kind of write down your sins in a notepad or write it out, and you go to a priest and you would absolve you, So it was kind of like confession in a way. So it was comfortable for me to do and easy for me to understand. And I say this to say step 4 is hard for a lot of people. I would have my own challenges in the steps, but steps 4 and 5 was not for me. I would say steps 6 and 7 were also life-changing for me because, I know ever since Eve ate the apple, I knew that we lived in a fallen world and people had character defects, you know what I mean? But I didn't know that God could redeem me and take away my character defects if I just so prayed, right? And that was a hard concept for me to understand, and particularly hard for me in the steps because my sponsor had me meditate upon my harms list and say, ask me if I left anything out, just as the big book describes, and you have to go back and tell your sponsor. And then I was rocketed to the 4th dimension. I was just, I got on my knees, I said the 7-step prayer, I was rocketed to the 4th dimension, and, it was absolutely life-changing. But I did have some struggles with it because I didn't think that God could conceivably take care of me. And there's several layers to this because First I didn't think he could take away my alcohol problem or the insanity of drinking and using. I definitely didn't trust telling people my dirty laundry, in step 5. And step 7, I didn't know God could take away those defects of character, which they still pop up. I still have a hard time with some things, but it's easier because I have God on my side, and I would do step 8 and step 9, and step 9 was absolutely fantastic. You talk about clearing the wreckage of the past. I never thought some people would forgive me. Like I said, maybe close family, maybe some friends, they would forgive me for what I did. But people that I really hurt, I had no idea that they would actually forgive me if I just so asked. Or not asked, rather. You're not supposed to ask for anything. Anyway, by bringing the problem to them, rather, let's say, and it's up to them to forgive me. But they did. I can remember, the girlfriend that I talked about way back through 25 minutes ago. I was living on her property in a tent. She forgave me. She told me to never contact her again, but she forgave me. I was like, hallelujah, close friends would forgive me. People that I didn't even consider friends would forgive me. Maybe acquaintances that I've hurt, or in my drinking and drugging, or perhaps, people I didn't even like. I had to make an amends to, and that was a tough one. I was like, dude, I hate this person. Why would I make an amends to them? So I had to do that, and but it was awesome, that I get to clear the wreckage of my past in significant ways. And part of that for me is financial amends too, which I'm still working on, because I owe a lot of people a lot of money, and still do, particularly companies, because I stole a lot. I mean, I was a fiend, like just terrible. I would go. I don't want to get too much into it, but I don't want to. If anybody's a cop in here, I don't know. I stole a tent from a like a whole tent. Like I just walked out with a tent, in Dick's Sporting Goods, and I was like, how did I even get away with this? But I would steal a lot, so I owe financial amends to companies, and I'm still working on that to this day. Money ebbs and flows for me, but I don't worry about it today. That's one of the promises. Another person who I never thought would forgive me ever in my entire life, and I've heard this said in speaker meetings, but people say to be patient on your step 9. You could hold on to an amends that you need to make for like 20 years. Because you won't get the opportunity to do it. But I had the opportunity when my father died recently to make an amends to my sister for just in my mind just scaring the heck out of her, in my psychosis, and she had an amends to make to me too. She said, "I'm sorry I didn't talk to you for 3 or 4 years," and that's this program. That's amazing. I have a relationship with my sister again. I never thought I'd get that back, And I would go on to do step 10, but I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I really didn't do step 10 that much. Like, I would admit when I was wrong and like try to probably fix it, kind of, but probably admit it. But I didn't practice that well until I got my new sponsor, who has me do a nightly review, and so that's absolutely fantastic. Definitely changes the way I view step 10 for sure. Step 11 is the most important step to me. As a serious Catholic, prayer and meditation to have a conscious contact with Christ, my God, my higher power, is absolutely, positively the most important step to me. I get on my knees every morning. I say, God, please keep me sane and sober. And then I get on my knees at night and I say, God, Thank you for keeping me sane and sober. And I say some other prayers too, and I also do some Catholic prayers, and as part of it, the whole thing is prayer and meditation to me. And, you know, step 12 was a weird one. I didn't really feel like I had a spiritual awakening. I still questioned if I had a spiritual awakening, but I definitely see how it spiritually awakened me, because I realized I need this program. I wouldn't be here talking to you guys as well as I am without this program. My life has completely changed, and it awakened me to the fact that I need to live one day at a time. And what does that mean? That means truly just taking one moment at a time for what it is, and I'm an overthinker, and so that's amazing to me. And that was spiritually awakening to me. It was a perspective shift that, allowed me to handle life on a different level, provided I work with others. And, so I have a sponsee. You guys might laugh, but he's from Canada. I have a virtual sponsee. That's right. I took a guy through the steps from Canada. And we have this relationship, we text each other every day. We call occasionally. He's doing pretty well. But he went from, I see the promises working in his life too. He went from when he first contacted me, and I used to go to a lot of online meetings. Now I do a lot in person. He contacted me, and he was really in a desperate strait. And I was like, yeah, I can take you on. He went from being homeless, addicted, alcoholic, to now living in his own place, doing volunteer work, and just changing his life. And, seeing that for me is life-changing. That makes me feel like this program actually works, and if anybody needs a sponsor, I could be one. I need a in-person sponsee. And today things are very different. I'm peaceful most days. I don't struggle in the same ways I used to. I'm happy, joyous, and free like 95% of the time. And I get to actually live life now because I didn't have a chance. I used to be one of those guys you see on the street and be like, God bless him. I hope he fixes his life someday. And I did, but it wasn't me. It was God. It was all God. I don't attribute anything to myself. I attribute everything to God, and some things that have happened since I've completed all 12 steps. I've gone back to school. I go to Kennesaw State University. I'm in a recovery program at Kennesaw State University for people who are in recovery. And I get like cool scholarships, and I get to have like a study space, and I get to print stuff out. There's like school materials. It's pretty dope, When I'm feeling like sick of everybody and everything, I can just go there and just kind of like listen to music, and I don't know. It's a cool space, But I'm starting off slow. I'm not going to do 4 classes right away. Because to me, that's just, with everything in my life, I have to take it one day at a time. I can't just put myself in the fire all at once, So I'm doing that right now, and I just got accepted into the Bailey School of Music for vocal performance. I told you guys I like to sing. Thank you. And singing is such a big part of my life too, I thought I would never be able to get to sing again. Maybe I sung in the shower occasionally, but I got to experience music again. I get to study music theory. I get to study piano. I get to study voice with a voice coach today, and I get to sing. I was a part of a choir. Unfortunately, I'm taking a sabbatical with my dad having been lost. But that's still one big aspect of my life, my church choir. But my main degree is in human services. What I want to do is end up working in rehabs and treatment centers for people who are like me, who need the 12 steps, who need recovery, who need mental health help, and give back what I was given, because I was given so much by so many different people. And, today I have an opportunity to give back and be of service. I'm being of service right now. I try to clean up after meetings. I don't raise my hand like a lot of people do. I just help sometimes. Maybe I read the 12 steps or the promises, but I try to be of service. Rarely, once in a blue moon, I'll make the coffee. So, if you ever have really strong coffee, that's me. I like my coffee very strong, and I get to live a life again. And that's amazing to me. And starting tomorrow, I'm taking motorcycle lessons, so I'll be on the road for the first time. Yeah. It's kind of dangerous, but whatever. At least I'll be able to get around. And that's really it, man. Life is challenging. Life is tough, and my life is not easy sometimes. I had to get through the death of my father. It was kind of sudden. It was very sudden, actually, and I got through it sober. I called you guys, and I never thought I would get through it sober. I can only imagine. I mean, my dad was sickly for a very long time. He had cancer. He had abdomen cancer, I believe. And it reached his organs. And he died. It reached his liver, and he died very quickly, very suddenly. And, but I never thought I would be able to handle something like that. I knew. For many years, I thought, what if my dad died? What if my dad died? What if my dad died? And he did. And I'm still standing here talking to you guys, And that's amazing. The fellowship is such a big part of this program, and a part that I hold dear. I can rely on you guys. I can rely on you guys. And I have friends in here, that I wouldn't have otherwise, and I remember when I went to treatment for hopefully the last time, I got to eat out with some friends from Cocaine Anonymous, and what an amazing experience that is, just to go out and eat with people. For newcomers, that must be amazing. I mean, I was a newcomer, so that was amazing, right? And I got to experience other alcoholics, who will understand my problem better than you guys, who will understand me being selfish, prideful, egotistical more than another alcoholic. And working with another alcoholic is really important too. It's the crux of the program. You have to give back what you were given, so I'll continue to do that, and I will continue to be in the program, work the program to the best of my ability, and I will continue on my mental health journey. You know, I'll graduate college, hopefully, God willing. You know, maybe I'll be in an opera or two. Just look out for me. You know, yeah, the promises do come true. You know, they sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, and the promises have definitely come true slowly for me, but that's okay because they're still coming true. You know, it's a spiritual experience that's unfolding every single day of my life, and if I let that happen every single day of my life, then I get to be sober. You know, and being sober in and of itself is a spiritual experience, in my opinion, because who else but alcoholics that are sober would understand being alcoholic, you know? And for that, I'm very, very grateful. And I just want to say I love you guys. You know, you guys help me out every single day. Shout out to my sponsor. You know, he's awesome, JP. Going through the steps again and doing the deal. Thank you.